Hi everyone, this is just a quick discussion on what the group project and final paper are going to be, how they're going to look this year. So what you see on your screen right now is the instructions for the group projects, group presentations, and the final paper. This is posted in the group project assignment, so this is exactly the same as what you can find on the assignments in Canvas. They're due next week, so next Friday, a week from today. We'll be watching everyone's group presentation just like we would in class during the final week of class. So after you turn them in next week, I'll watch everyone's and comment on them. So make sure you do it well. I recommend using PowerPoint to create your presentation. That makes sense to me. Each person can create 2 to 3 slides, record their voice over each slide, and then send it on to the next person in the group. So here's how you would do that. You'd open up a PowerPoint presentation. We can type in something here, group presentation. We'll add another slide. Maybe we'll do 2 slides. This is slide 1. Okay, so if we have a group presentation, if you want to record yourself talking over this, you would go to slideshow, record slideshow, and you can see you can start from the beginning, or you can start recording from the current slide. So anytime someone passes along to you a slideshow, make sure you're starting recording from the current slide, the ones that you just created. So all you would do is start recording, and then it pops up with this. It records for a bit. You can move on to the next slide, record another discussion on slide 1, cancel it out, and then save it, and then your voice is saved over every slide. And you can pass it along to the next person, and they can add more slides, like so, and then add their voice to it. If you have trouble with that, let me know. This means you'll have to work together as a group, so that each person is responsible for a certain portion of the presentation, and the presentation is coherent. This also means, which I think is actually going to be helpful for some of you, that you're going to listen to your slides, and you're going to realize you kind of have to practice. This is a good thing to practice. Giving presentations is not easy. And when I have an important presentation, I'll definitely practice my slides. And so I think this will be good experience to listen to how you sound when you just do it off the cuff. You may even write down what you want to say on each slide and then just read it. The important thing is that we don't want these things going more than 10 to 15 minutes, the whole presentation. So if you pass along your slides to someone and you've been talking for 5 minutes, you've taken up half the presentation. So keep your discussions short and to the point on each of your slides. What is this thing about? So the whole point of this section of the class is the energy sector is the most polluting sector in the entire economy. We've studied electricity, we've studied oil, we've studied a little bit of natural gas. It's the place that most of our emissions come from. Transportation as well, if you include that in there for sure. And then we talked about the externalities coming from energy production and consumption in the last bit of the class. And then the point of the DICE model is to figure out what is the externality cost of producing and consuming energy, but also any activity we do that produces carbon dioxide. And so this is the point of the DICE model is to calculate the wedge between the private marginal cost and the social marginal cost in those welfare graphs. And so what I want you to do is think about ultimately with the final paper and to some extent with this group project, what that means when you calculate this externality cost. It's equal to that wedge between the private marginal cost and social marginal cost. So that means that's the optimal tax on emissions. And if we were to internalize the externality and we were to place a tax on those emissions equal to whatever our social cost of carbon estimate is, what would that do? Now you have enough knowledge about electricity sectors and oil sectors and a bit about natural gas to discuss how a tax or an internalization of the pollution externality would affect the energy sectors. So I want you to think about how placing a tax on emissions would affect electricity production and consumption. How would it reorder the supply curve? Would it completely put coal out of business, for example? In the long run, would it shift us towards more renewable electricity consumption? Would it cause the price of gasoline to go up enough where people start purchasing electric vehicles and then maybe even charging their electric vehicles at home? So it's going to affect every nook and cranny of the energy sector. So I want you to think about that. But it's not quite that simple. We first have to calculate the social cost of carbon. And so you've done that in the first DICE assignment. And we can calculate it, but then we want to perform some sensitivity analyses. We're not quite positive that the calculation we get straight out of the box is the one that is correct. So we've picked a few different groups, a few different aspects of the DICE model we think are important that we're going to mess around with. We're going to tweak, try different parameter values and see how that affects the social cost of carbon estimates. So the first question for your group is, with respect to whatever your topic is, damages or discount rates or decarbonization, what can be changed in the DICE model? So figure out what parameter can be changed, and if you're in the discount rate group, obviously it's the discount rates. If it's the damage function, obviously it's the damage functions. Decarbonization, obviously it's the sigma parameter, and then the climate sensitivity is the climate sensitivity parameter. But you could probably find other places to change in the model to affect each of those things. So figure out what can be changed in the DICE model with respect to your topic and adjust it. Then outline the functions and the parameters in the class, whether you can find them in the DICE model. Show us in the model where you're making those changes. And then the reason I had you do the assignment, the second DICE model assignment, the literature review, is because I want you to make changes to the DICE model to perform this sensitivity analysis, but I don't want you to just pull them out of thin air. I don't want the changes, the values that you choose to be pulled out of thin air. I want you to support the values with research. I want you to look up papers or look up stuff, the values that the interagency working group used, or what Nordhaus is suggesting nowadays, because this DICE model that we're using is from 2010, I believe. Obviously, he's probably made some changes to the model since then. What is he doing now? Maybe you could use that as your upper or lower bound on your parameter estimates. So basically, you're going to make some changes to the model, and you're going to have to back them up with literature. Then you want to show us what happens to the model output, or the social cost of carbon estimate, if you make these changes to your parameters. So run the model with the alternative sets of parameters and show us the social cost of carbon estimates from each run. This is really just as simple as doing something like this. So if you're in the discount rate group, you're going to give us a table that says, here's the discount rates I used, 2% all the way up to 10%, and here are the social cost of carbon estimates I get based on those different discount rates. And so I want to know from the literature why you chose the discount rate of 2% as your lower bound and the discount rate of 10% as your upper bound. And then obviously you're going to have to give us a suggestion of what your preferred estimate is, or the mean estimate. maybe it's 2.8%. So why did you choose that? So you have to back that up, justify your choice. And then we can't really do this one over PowerPoint, but the idea would be we'd end with a discussion about each of the functions and parameters that can be changed. How might you change them if you had unlimited modeling power and capabilities, and what are the remaining uncertainties in the functions, the parameters? How might the remaining uncertainties affect model output? What else would you like to know about this topic? So we'll end hopefully in this class with a bit of discussion on each of these topics here. After everyone's presented on their topics, and then which is the most important parameter in the model, which one has the largest effect on the social cost of carbon estimates. Okay, for the final paper, 5 pages maximum, I want you to keep it short because I want you to think of this as it's a policy brief. If you were working at the Environmental Protection Agency or on the Council of Economic Advisors for the President, they don't have time to read a very long document. Usually it's going to be even less than 5 pages, but I suppose that's what you've been given. They've hired you to estimate the social cost of carbon and use it to generate an optimal tax on emissions under the Clean Power Plan, and then discuss what the effects of your carbon tax would be. Well, first you have to justify your carbon tax, and you give a range of estimates based on the parameters that you adjust. In this case, I adjusted discount rates down here, and then provide a suggestion of the optimal carbon tax and what are the implications of your carbon tax on the energy sector, as I mentioned at the beginning. So I give you some fairly specific guidelines for the paper. Please check your grammar and reread your paper out loud to make sure it reads well. I'll take 10 points off if it's clear you did not reread your paper. So simple things like if your sentences end in the middle of the sentence, clearly you did not reread it. Okay, so 1 to 2 paragraphs on the philosophy of the social cost of carbon. Why does it matter? This could be showing the graph of the private marginal costs and the social marginal costs, and or just generally why we should internalize externalities. However you think you want to describe why the social cost of carbon is important. Run the DICE model, calculate the baseline or the average social cost of carbon. Discuss what this means. This is the one that you want to select for your tax or your suggestion for the carbon tax. Then you perform your sensitivity analysis just like you did in the group presentation. You can, by the way, you can take the analysis you did in the group presentation and use it for your paper. I don't think you need to do a new analysis unless you want to. And then present the sensitivity analysis in the paper. Discuss where the range of parameters come from. So this is where you need to cite literature. Please cite it in an acceptable style, where you give the author's name and then the year of the publication in the text, and then you have a reference section at the bottom of your paper. I'll take points off if you don't do that. If you tell me that you've cited things, so for example, some people only give me the references at the bottom of the paper, but they don't tell me what the references are referencing within the text. That's not okay because I don't know what the references are for. If you make a statement like this discount rate was used in this interagency working group document, you need to cite in the text that what interagency working group document you're talking about, or you need to cite in the text Nordhaus's book that you got this information from. Then summarize your findings. What is your suggestion for the tax? One paragraph. And then finally tie it to the what we learned in the class. What are the policy implications? What effect will it have on the electricity sector, the transportation sector, in other words, oil? What will happen to the merit order of electricity production, etc. So think about all these things. Energy security. What additional policies might you suggest the EPA implements to alleviate some of the difficulties imposed by the carbon tax? So we might think of subsidies or taking some of the revenue from the carbon tax and redistributing it as income or lump sum payments to lower people that are worse off from the carbon tax, or countries that are worse off from the carbon tax. Okay, let me know if you have questions. I will be in office hours as normal. Please come to office hours if you have questions, and hope to hear from you.